Performance. Today we're working on the 331 Chrysler Hemi. Before we clean up some of the parts, we're going to check the connecting rods, the journal sizes on the crankshaft. We're planning on polishing the crank. It doesn't really seem to need to be ground. I put a mic to it. It looks fairly decent. So we're going to check to see how far the connecting rods are out of round and what size they are. So that's what this video will be. We're going to pin fit the pistons. Pretty much are done now. We've got them knurled. They're cleaned up. I'm going to clean them probably one more final time. So we're going to go in and clean up the pin bores on them because I've had to bead blast them, so they're a little bit on the fuzzy side. So we're going to lightly clean them up. So that's what this video will be. I'm going to get into a little bit about bearing sizes, but in how different manufacturers have different size bearings on this particular bearing, because it's, you know, it's kind of an obsolete bearing that I know of. I haven't did a lot of research on the bearing size, but it appears to me that it's a special order bearing. So there's not going to be like a one bearing for it. So, you know, it's either going to be standard 10, 20, whatever they have. That's kind of what you're going to end up with. And but it's an ACL bearing. We have kings for the mains, and I guess that's just the way it kind of works on these things. I've done some obsolete stuff before where you get the bearings in a box that says bearings on them, and usually on situations like that you usually want to grind to size, but I'm not going to get too far into that. And of course they make different bearings for different applications. When we get into the race stuff, I'll talk about them types of bearings, but there's a lot of different bearings and there's a lot of different bearing materials. So I don't want to be covering all of that, because that could be, you know, a half a dozen videos of just that. So this is just basic, decent information on if you're going to rebuild something, or if you want to learn a little bit about bearings and how I go about it. I'm not saying that this is the absolute right way, but it's pretty close to it. So thanks for watching. So we're going to check a couple of Hemi rods right now for the 331, just to check the clearances roughly. Everything looked pretty good, but with different bearing manufacturers you can get different sizes, even though the bearings are standard. There is some variance, and when you polish things and you know, like the crank, and you start cleaning stuff up, you can usually end up being bigger than maybe you want to be on clearances. It depends on the application, of course. We're not going to get into that too much. But I have the gauge set up for the small end of the spec of the housing board. That means the smallest diameter that's acceptable. So we're going to check it. So this one's reading 0, and it grows quite a bit through the parting line, 1/1000. So that rod really should be reconditioned. Okay, we're going to check this rod here. This is reading 1/2 thousandths, and it's climbing up to 1 at the parting lines. That's not unusual. So this rod is basically 1/2 thousandths on the big side of the spec, which that's what they give us. So now we're going to go over and we're going to check bearing clearances. Now, mic to crank, I set the dial bore gauge off the mic reading on the crank. We're going to put the bearing insert in the rod, torque it up, and we're going to see what these two rods give me for clearance. So I'm going to mark the rod, the biggest rod, and I'm going to mark it so we don't get them mixed up. And I'll show you where we'll be at on that. Okay, I've got the dial bore gauge, and this is the big housing. rod, I marked it big. This is the bearing in it, torqued up, everything's checked, measured off the crankshaft size. The crankshaft is at the small end of the spec. So that's what we're at. We're at three and a couple tenths, and of course once I polish the crank I'm going to lose a couple tenths there. So, and for a race engine that wouldn't be horrible, but this is pretty much a mild engine, and the spec is anywhere from 0.5 thousandths to 2.5 thousandths. So we're at 2.5 right there, which would be acceptable. And if I go through the rods and recondition them, I can probably tighten it up a little bit more, because this rod had a little bit of run out on it, if you've seen that or not. So that's how much the clearance can change on a rod housing. And like I said before in previous videos, I always like to try to keep my rod housings at the tight end of the spec. There's no guarantee that just because you get a crankshaft ground that you're going to get the clearances that you want, because bearings vary quite a bit. Usually on a lot of stuff, we'll grind the clearances with the bearings, so we know exactly what we have for oil clearance when we grind a crank. We're going to polish up the piston pins a little bit before we pin fit the pistons. That way we'll get a better size on them. They don't feel too terribly bad. There's a little varnish on here. We're going to hit that with a little wire brush lightly. Okay, now what I have is a 7/16 stud and a couple 7/16 rocker balls from a big block Chevrolet, and they center up the pins pretty nice. I'm going to use a wore out piece of 600 paper. We're going to hit that little lacquer thinner. Got a little bit of a gummy buildup on there. We want it to polish evenly. If not, we'll have a little spot there on that pin. There's a little etching there. We're going to let that go. That's where the moisture has attacked the pin a little bit. So we're going to hit it with a little 1200. Wet the paper down a little bit here. We're going to call that good enough, because we don't want to start removing a bunch of material. We just want to make sure that it goes together easily, and I'm sure that it will. That little bit of etching ain't going to affect much. The low horsepower engine. The moisture and the acids in the crankcase over 60 years of sitting around, I'm sure, has contributed to a little bit of that in the wrist pin, but we're not going to worry about that. We have the wrist pins polished up, cleaned up a bit, as good as they're going to be. There's a little bit of staining in here, a little etching from moisture and condensation. That's not the critical area of the pin. That's where the pin actually is not, well, it is exposed. So we're going to set the, I'm going to call this a comparator gauge. Basically, that's what it is. It's a pin, clamp the pins in there and get your size. So this has got to be somewhat tight, and you back it off just a little bit like that. Check it, turn the pin a little bit, should be snug. I don't back it off a whole lot. This is the top, and so we'll zero the gauge. Okay, now these pistons are used, so we're probably got a little bit of wear in there. I suspect it's not going to be like a brand new piston. So we're going to shoot for anything below 1,000ths or max 1,000ths on the pin. Piston's going to get hot, aluminums are going to expand. The pin will expand a little bit with heat, but not as quick as the aluminum. So we're going to check it. Okay, usually they're at about 6/10. This one says 5, so that's really not bad. There's a chart up there for the piston size and what it should be. Now on this side it's bigger. The side says 1. So we're not going to take anything off that side, that's for sure. Yep. The side says 5. No, this side says 1. No, now it's reading something different. There must be some junk in there. We're just going to lightly touch these now. We don't want to... Yeah, that's strange. There must have been something on it. So we're going to go in there. This mandrel is made for an interrupted bore. But some bores have grooves in them for oiling. But this is a longer mandrel, and it's made for doing pistons. I've gone and I've chewed it. We're just going to lightly touch it. We're not trying to take much material off of this. We just want the pins to slide through easily. Okay, we're just going to go in there. That's going to be it. We're going to stop right there. It doesn't take much. It says 4/10. Says 4/10. I'm just going to go in there and touch it one more time. And that's good. We're going to call that one done. We'll check this one. Looks like 3/10. Better to check it more than once than and monitor how much you're taking off. You can't put it back on. This one says 4/10. This one says 4/10. We're going to leave it. We'll wash them out when the grit's out of them, the honing grit. Then we'll check for how the pin fits. This is the only way that I know of accurately to do this. You can't do this with a snap gauge. This gauge takes the feel out of everything. So when you start talking less than 1/1000, you're going to have to be pretty good. You know, you can do it with a dial bore gauge if you got one small enough. But that's what this gauge is pretty much made for. Four tenths. A lot of times if you take the lock off the piston, it'll raise up a burr around the pin bore, and a lot of times the pin won't go in as easy as it could. Okay, so We're just going to go in and take a little bit off. That says about 3/10 on that one. Five-tenths, 4/10 on the other side. Yeah. Just a slate. Okay. We got pin bores lightly honed, very lightly. Didn't take much out of them. You know, they were bead blasted, so I wanted to make sure that we got, you know, anything that was high or from the clips, taking the clips out or anything like that to be clean and free, and they are. We're going to have to do some more cleaning on them, but they're clean enough to get an idea where the pin is on these. And I'm just going to slip a pin in here just to show you. We know what the size is, so it should slide right through there. It's still, I mean, it's not excessive, but it's right where I want it. Turned out pretty good. I was expecting to be on the high side of, you know, the clearance on that, but it ended up being pretty much where I'd put them. So that's like 50 weight oil on that pin, and it's perfect. So the pins are all fitted. The pistons are basically done. Gonna wash them one more time before we put them on and deburr them a little bit around the skirt area. Probably hit them with a light piece of sandpaper, wet dry, probably like 320. And wash them again really good, but basically the pistons are done. We're going to wash the rods. The rods are going to have to be reconned, probably recondition the rods, the big end on them. That'll be another video. This one's going to be a short little video, and thanks for watching. I'm going to get back on the 565. I got my rocker stand and I've got my crank trigger, so I'm going to fit that, and then we got to just do a push rod length check, excuse me, and put the intake on it, and that one's done. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button. Thanks.